Welcome to Canadian Doctors Speak Out, where we're going to give you the top reasons not to be afraid of COVID. When we hear the word COVID or coronavirus, we now instinctively reach for a mask or look around to see how we can protect ourselves and our families. No place really seems safe. But as Canadian medical doctors, we're going to tell you what the best science now has to say, and we think you will be pleasantly surprised. On the TV, we hear cases, which would frighten anyone, but cases are not necessarily symptomatic people, and the vast majority have few or really no symptoms of being sick. They just have a positive PCR swab test. Research now shows that the PCR test is practically worthless. Only 3% of patients with a positive test actually have the COVID virus. People have died, yes, that's true, but using case numbers gives a false picture of what is really going on. Here's a graph showing the COVID cases reported each week in Canada. Even I get frightened looking at this graph. But now let's put the weekly deaths on the same chart. Where are all the deaths that we would expect to follow the cases curve? Something is really fishy here. Let's look at yearly deaths in Canada from 2001. It's pretty hard to show that we've even had a pandemic. The slight increase in 2020 was probably due to an aging population. But aren't hospital intensive care units overloaded with COVID patients? If we look at the Ontario Intensive Care Unit data, there are fewer patients in the ICU in 2020 than in each of the previous 3 years. The CDC's own data compares COVID to seasonal flu. In children, COVID illness is so mild, their death rate is statistically 0. For people under 50, the infection survival rate is greater than 99.98%. And for those over 70, it is 94.6%. And that is without any early treatment whatsoever, like vitamin D or vitamin C. So if you're young, you really don't have anything to worry about. If you're older, well, we're going to give you some really great ideas on how to protect your health that do not include getting a shot with the vaccine.
So back in April, we knew so little about COVID, and this led us to take a lot of extra precautions, including adopting the idea that healthy people can spread disease. This is known as asymptomatic spread, and that's a very scary thought. Now, however, over 10 million cases have been studied, and evidence is rapidly emerging both from Wuhan and the University of Florida, showing that asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic spread are negligible to non-existent. This is a game changer. This means that we can take our lives back and go back to the time-tested advice I've always given my patients when they have a virus. If you're sick, stay home, and the rest of us can be free to live our lives.
We have great news. Do you know that many of us are already immune to SARS-CoV-2 due to cross-reactive T cells? A T cell is just another immune cell that helps our body fight infection. At the beginning of the pandemic, SARS-CoV-2 was considered a novel coronavirus, meaning that none of us were immune to it and all of us were still at risk for infection. However, immunologists and virologists worldwide have studied and found that 30 to 50% of people already have pre-existing immunity to SARS-CoV-2 from pre-existing circulating T cells. This pre-existing immunity is due to prior exposure from other coronaviruses, such as the common cold. So the problem is with testing for COVID immunity is most of the tests are serum antibody tests, but this doesn't look at our T cell response. And antibody levels decline over time, but we still have our T cells to protect us. Many of us are more protected than we realize from COVID from our T cells. This is exciting news because we are closer to herd immunity than we realize.
We have heard a lot about how children are COVID super spreaders. Terrified, we have shut down our schools, covered our children's beautiful faces with masks, and stopped them from playing with one another. Many teachers are too scared to even step foot into a classroom. But the science shows that none of this is warranted. If children do get COVID-19, they might not even show any symptoms. And if they do, they're usually mild, and they're not the drivers of the pandemic. Epidemiological data shows that the disease follows a much milder course in children compared to adults. Since the pandemic began, only 4 people under the age of 19 have died with COVID in all of Canada. That's 4 out of 8 million children and teenagers. By comparison, 10 children died of influenza in the 2018 to 2019 flu season. influenza has killed more children annually than COVID-19. An overwhelming number of peer-reviewed studies now show children, especially those under the age of 10, are not a significant factor in the transmission of COVID. Studies in the UK, Australia, Switzerland, France, and Norway have shown that there is minimal child-to-child and child-to-adult transmission in schools. A study in The Lancet also showed that closing schools was never medically warranted. A German study of parents and their children showed that parents are way more likely to infect their children rather than the other way around. When we look at the large and growing body of scientific evidence, we can put the fear behind us and let our children be children again. They can go to school, play, be with their friends, and do the things they love. It's time we give our children their life and childhood back.
I am not afraid of this coronavirus, and you do not need to be afraid either. We've evolved with these respiratory viruses over thousands and thousands of years, and we've developed a highly intelligent and very sophisticated immune system. We support and strengthen our immune system when we eat nutritious food, when we engage in physical activity, when we spend time in nature and feel supported by life. Vitamin D is a critical nutrient for our immune system. When we supplement with vitamin C, with zinc, with magnesium, our immune system is primed and ready to go. In spite of suboptimal diets and widespread vitamin D deficiencies, most people who encounter the coronavirus do not require hospitalizations, but are able to manage their symptoms at home. I myself had COVID-19 11 months ago, and I responded to the early viral symptoms the way I always do. I took vitamin D, 60,000 international units each day until the symptoms were gone. It took 2 days. The fact that I am here talking to you is proof that our bodies know what to do.
I have more than 40 years' experience practicing medicine here in Canada, and at least 30 of those have been as a specialty anesthesiologist with the FRCPC. Anesthesiologists are well accepted as clinical pharmacologists by other physicians because we know the risk-benefit ratio about drugs. In addition, safe and long experienced use of older drugs can be very useful in combating a new problem, such as COVID. With this in mind and reviewing the literature, I treat my patients with early COVID-19 with quercetin, zinc, vitamin C, vitamin D. If you're able to get a prescription, hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. In addition, I have used ivermectin for post-COVID symptoms with some success. If needed, oxygen supplementation with nasal specs, often based on what your personal oximeter, which I recommend, says for you. In all of the patients that I have treated, this regimen has worked for them and they have not needed hospitalization. I myself had COVID-19 in November last year. Taking these agents, as I've listed, was incredibly helpful for me, and I recovered within 7 to 10 days. In summary, I would like to have you let go of the fear. It does not serve us. There are many things that we can do for ourselves, and then we've got the hospital as backup.
Many of us have heard about something that is designed to scare the living daylights out of you. It's something we're hearing 24/7 pumped through your television set. And that's the possibility of dangerous variants. Now, here's something that will surprise you. One slight variant was artificially created after a lot of hard work in a mouse study. The so-called variants had never been found in humans. This was followed by some papers with mathematical modeling and coding, not real-life observation. This was simply guesswork about spread and severity, not real research with human beings. That is the sole foundation of all you're hearing about on the TV. Viruses naturally change over time and new strains emerge. Since a virus cannot live alone but depends upon human cells to live, it makes evolutionary sense that it will become less dangerous, not more so over time. If it becomes more easily spread, but less likely to make you really sick, then that is a good natural progression towards herd immunity. The COVID virus is no different. Over all the time we have studied viruses, that is what they've always done. Adapt to humans as humans adapt to them. We can all relax, since viruses always become less likely to cause harm as time goes on. When you put it all together, there are so many reasons not to be afraid of COVID. When we honestly evaluate the COVID evidence and stop being fearful, we can start living life fully, become a joyful member of our family and community again. Hiding inside your home and avoiding people, it's not necessary. Humans are social creatures and do not do well in isolation. For one thing, both solitary confinement and fear are harmful to your immune system. 4 hugs a day are indeed the minimum. So make sure your nutrition is good and don't forget to take vitamin D in the wintertime to optimize your immune system. 4,000 international units is a good daily amount for Canadian adults, followed by a blood test in about a month to make sure that's the right amount for you. Vitamin D is safe, it's inexpensive, and has been shown to boost resistance to viral respiratory infections, including COVID. And remember, the real virus is fear. It stops a person from thinking clearly. Now is the time to turn off your TV set and learn how to do some reasoning for yourself. It doesn't take a doctor or even a rocket scientist to figure it out. Just look out your own front door and see what is really happening. The evidence is clear. You do not need to be afraid of a little COVID virus.